Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The Israeli military has declared Gaza City a dangerous combat zone amid plans to capture the city entirely after nearly 2 years of conflict. The recently announced daily tactical pauses for aid distribution will no longer apply, as the move signals further intensification of military operations in the area. U.S. Senator Roger Wicker, chairman of the powerful Senate Armed Services Committee, has declared that Taiwan has the right to top-reserve self-determination and be free during a meeting with President Lai Ching-te in Taipei. The statement comes amid his first visit while U.S. remains Taiwan's significant international supporter. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has stated that India and Japan will shape the Asian century as Japan announced $68 billion in investments. Modi and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Shiba have also highlighted plans to double the number of Indian nationals to Japan to boost trade beyond its current $20 billion and further expand partnership in semiconductors, AI, and high-speed rail. European Union defense ministers have arrived for an informal meeting to discuss regional security and defense cooperation. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas and defense ministers from Denmark, Lithuania, Estonia, and Germany provided opening comments. The session marks the start of discussions on joint military and strategic initiatives. Thailand's Constitutional Court has removed and suspended Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra and her cabinet over earlier border dispute with Cambodia. The 9-judge panel ruled that she failed to uphold ethical standards during a leaked call with former Cambodian leader Hun Sen. Mauritius Prime Minister Navin Chandra Ramgoolam has dismissed Central Bank's second Deputy Governor Gerald Sanspure after a public rift with Governor Rama Sitanen. Ramgoolam has told that the standoff was unacceptable, while Sanspure announced he would address the issue in a press conference, according to media reports. The United Nations Human Rights Office reported that Iran has executed at least 841 people so far this year, including women, Afghan nationals, and ethnic minorities, according to media reports. In July alone, 100 people were put to death, more than double the number from July last year, marking a sharp surge in executions. Guyanese voters will head to the polls today to decide whether President Irfan Ali's ruling People's Progressive Party can hold its parliamentary majority and continue guiding one of the world's fastest-growing economies. Driven by ExxonMobil's offshore oil discoveries, the opposition parties have criticized the PPP's infrastructure spending and shifted their stance on Exxon contract. Israel has recovered the body of hostage Ilan Weiss from the Gaza Strip. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has confirmed Weiss was kidnapped and killed during the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack. Items belonging to a second individual were also found, though their identity remains undisclosed. Weiss's wife and daughter were also taken hostage but were later released in a prisoner swap in November. Israel says 49 hostages still remain in Gaza, with only 20 believed to be alive. Meanwhile, Palestinians mourn 6 family members killed overnight in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza City. The victims were sheltering in a tent when the strike hit. Their bodies were laid at Al-Shifa Hospital as relatives prayed ahead of burial. Israel says it aims to target Hamas's group and free hostages while trying to avoid civilian casualties. Let's listen into what some of the relatives of Palestinians killed in Israeli strikes have said.
ما مش فاهم ليش انقصفوا؟ ايش حجتهم المره هاد؟ ايش الحجه؟ ليش قصفوهم؟ يقولوا لنا ايش عملوا هذول هم نايمين اطفال ابو 3 سنين، ايش عمل؟ رفع عليهم ايش سلاح؟ ايش ارهابي هذا؟ ايش عمل طفل صغير اللي في ايده لعبه ونايم؟
ليست حرب، هذه مجازر، هذه حرب اباده وليس حرب بين طرفين، بل هي من طرف واحد إبادة شعب قطاع غزة بالكامل، وليست يعني حرب، إنما هي إبادة، ترحيل وتشريد وتدمير، الصغير قبل الكبير، المرأة قبل الرجل.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you, Ross, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, with the recovery of one of the bodies and reports of more than 40 hostages still in Gaza, how does this development affect Israel's operational priorities and also Israeli public sentiment?
Well, there are two very, very distinct issues there. Now, the operational goals of the Israeli military in Gaza have recently expanded, and that's notwithstanding the fact that there's a number of living hostages as well as the bodies of deceased hostages that are still being held by Hamas. And although there's been public protest that has been ongoing for an extended period of time against the way that Netanyahu has decided to conduct the war, those domestic political protests, and let alone the international criticism, have not stopped Israel's government from conducting the war in the way that they want to. So whether it's public protest or the recovery of a body of a deceased hostage, at the moment, it doesn't seem to affect the military goals or the orders that Prime Minister Netanyahu gives to the military.
And do you think could this intensify pressure on the Israeli government to change their course of military action?
Well, that's really the interesting question here, because up to now, that really hasn't changed what Netanyahu does. There's a large number of people in Israel who simply don't like him. They didn't like him before the war with Hamas, and they didn't like him after the war. And of course, there's the relatives of the hostages who are constantly leading rallies to change the way the war is being conducted, to reach a ceasefire so that any living hostages can be released. And again, Netanyahu is he's just immune to that. He is not responsive to that kind of domestic criticism. He hasn't been for an extended period of time. And again, his recent decision that he's ordering the Israeli Defense Forces to occupy Gaza City, he's calling up additional reservists. Again, it indicates that despite domestic criticism, he's immune to that for now, and he's continuing to conduct the war in the way he wants to.
And how sustainable and also how risky is it that Israel's current strategy of balancing hostage recovery with targeted strikes?
There are a number of issues at play there. One, there's the domestic criticism, but again, Netanyahu is for now immune to that. He's not listening to that, and he's proceeding regardless of that domestic criticism. There's the international criticism, which similarly Netanyahu is generally immune to. He was responsive to some of the criticism about the food situation and malnutrition, and he has allowed in more aid trucks, although it's clearly not enough, but he's allowed in more in recent months compared to, say, 4 or 5 months ago. Ultimately, the biggest supporter of Israel is the United States and the Trump administration. And for now, the Trump administration is continuing to back Netanyahu, although the Trump administration is involved, along with Egypt and Qatar, in trying to mediate ceasefires. And I think the Trump administration genuinely is committed to that process and would like to see a ceasefire. But in the absence of a ceasefire, the Trump administration continues to support Netanyahu, continues to provide weapons to the Israeli military. And with that backing, Netanyahu he'll continue to do what he thinks is the best policies to keep Israel safe.
Right. Thank you very much, Ross, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, Thailand's Constitutional Court has dismissed Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra from office after only a year in power. Paetongtarn was suspended last month after being accused of not defending Thailand during a leaked phone call with former Cambodian leader Hun Sen in June. As per the court's latest decision, Paetongtarn and her cabinet have now been dismissed over ethical violations in handling of the country's border row with Cambodia. Paetongtarn has maintained she acted in the nation's best interest throughout the incident. In a statement after the court ruling, she expressed her gratitude to Thai citizens for allowing her to serve the country. Let's listen in.
ดิฉันต้องขอบพระคุณพี่น้องประชาชนทุกท่านที่ได้ให้โอกาสดิฉันทำงานเพื่อประเทศชาติมาเกือบ1 ปีเต็มดิฉันมีความภาคภูมิใจที่ได้มาอยู่ตรงนี้ได้ทำเพื่อประเทศชาตินำประสบ
Paetongtarn is the 6th Prime Minister from or backed by the billionaire Shinawatra family to be removed by the military or the judiciary. Meanwhile, the acting Prime Minister Phuntham Vachayachai, a few Thai party member, has said a prime ministerial candidate would be nominated as soon as possible. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for staying with us. Now, what does this dismissal of Paetongtarn Shinawatra signal? Could this further erode public trust in the democratic process, especially given the Shinawatra family's repeated removal?
It really remains to be seen. At the moment, indications are that the coalition, which agreed to Paetongtarn Shinawatra's predecessor after the election in 2023, and also agreed to her becoming the prime minister when her predecessor also was removed from office by the Constitutional Court. At the moment, it seems the coalition wants to find an eligible candidate from within the ranks of the parties that make up this coalition. In other words, they don't seem eager to have a snap election. If they did fail to reach a consensus, and Thailand did go into a snap election where there'd have to be very complex negotiations after the election to form a coalition and to find another prime minister, then I think your question would become more of a concern. A snap election and difficulty in finding another prime minister would really cause some doubt about the sustainability and the strength of some of Thailand's democratic institutions. But if the coalition, based on what they've indicated today, after the announcement was made by the Constitutional Court, really can truly work together to find an eligible prime minister candidate within their own ranks, then frankly Thailand will move on. And the reason why I say that is we've seen this so many times. The Constitutional Court has removed prime ministers multiple times. Again, it removed Paetongtarn Shinawatra's predecessor about a year ago, and he was only in office for about 1 year. So the Thai people are used to this. They may not like it, but I think there's also an appreciation that at the moment there are larger issues at play as well. So of course, there's the dispute with Cambodia, which nobody wants to flare up again. There's the trade situation with the United States. Thailand has also been facing a significant fall in inbound tourism, which, regardless of which side of politics politicians in Thailand are, they're all trying to find a solution to that as well. So I think there's an appreciation that there's some bigger issues at play. It's best to find a replacement prime minister as quickly as possible within the coalition and avoid a snap election.
Yes, like you said, Ross, the timing is crucial for Thailand now, and they need to find someone to replace as soon as possible. You also mentioned there are bigger issues. So is there space for meaningful political reform there, or is Thailand likely to see continued cycles of electoral wins followed by institutional pushback?
As long as the Constitutional Court retains this ability to remove prime ministers, as long as there's still a conservative element in society, which is often described as being made up of the royal court and the military and big business leaders, as long as there's regional disagreements, is often described as the rural areas and Bangkok having people with very vastly different views about how Thailand should be governed. As long as issues exist, these problems are not going to go away, and these cycles will continue to happen in the future, notwithstanding the possibility that the current coalition will try as quickly as possible to find a replacement prime minister.
Right. Thank you very much, Ross Feingold, for joining us and sharing your insight as a political analyst. Thank you very much. Now we move on. Russian Foreign Ministry has come up with the statement on the renewal of new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. It says that the main barrier to cooperation on nuclear arms is the state of relations between Russia and the United States. The New START Treaty entered into force on February 5, 2011. Under the treaty, the United States and the Russian Federation had 7 years to meet the treaty's central limits on strategic offensive arms. The treaty remains valid till February 2026. Earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump had said that he wanted to open denuclearization talks with Russia and China. He also added that he had already discussed the topic with Russian President Vladimir Putin during their meeting in Alaska summit. Russia's statement marks uncertainty over nuclear talks. Let's listen into what Russian spokesperson has said.
Сначала предпосылки для возможного перезапуска договорного процесса. Ключевым препятствием остается нынешнее состояние требующих выправления российско-американских отношений. Кроме того, Вашингтону необходимо вернуться к практическому соблюдению фундаментальных принципов ДСНВ, о чем ведется речь: неделимость безопасности, равноправие и взаимовыгодное взаимодействие, признание неразрывной взаимосвязи стратегических, наступательных и оборонительных.
Now for this discussion, we are joined by Scott Faulkner. He's the head of Eagle Enterprises, a security firm based in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Scott, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, given President Trump's stated interest in trilateral denuclearization talks, including China, how feasible is this approach in the current geopolitical climate? Could you hear me?
There's a lot of incentive on the part of the United States to limit nuclear weapons. Primarily, the U.S. nuclear arsenal is aging. I mean, many of these missiles that are in our missile silos are 30, 40 years old, which means this is all before microchips and other solid-state technologies. So the more we can limit the number of missiles that are going to be in each arsenal, that's going to be a big budget savings for the United States. So so beyond the usual, peace and cooperation issue, there's an actual very significant budget issue that's driving the U.S.'s interest in having renewing these talks and having them successful.
And Scott, might involving China complicate or delay process on bilateral arms control between U.S. and Russia?
It's always complex. I mean, none of these negotiations, whether it's about Ukraine, whether it's about trade, whether it's about the nuclear arsenal itself, I mean, none of these things happen in isolation. They're all interconnected in different ways. And so the other piece that is always cautionary is that going back to the Cold War, the Soviet Union violated every single nuclear agreement, and post-Cold War, Russia has violated every nuclear agreement. So one has to go into this with open eyes, that that whatever is ultimately negotiated and signed, compliance is going to be a major challenge.
And with Russia citing strained relations as the main obstacle to renewing the New START treaty, what are the broader implications for global nuclear stability?
Well, the key there has always been, going back into the 1960s, proliferation. You do not want more countries getting nuclear weapons. And with the attacks that the U.S. mounted on Iran earlier this summer, you do not want to have, especially bad actors like Iran, getting that nuclear capability. So a key part to all of this is not only limiting the arsenals of those who already have the weapons, but to make sure no one else does.
Thank you very much, Scott, for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, President Donald Trump revokes former Vice President Kamala Harris's Secret Service protection. According to a letter reviewed by CNN, former presidents receive lifetime protection, while former vice presidents get 6 months, which had been extended for an additional year by President Biden before leaving office. President Trump cancels that extension. Effective on September 1st, Harris is about to start a multi-city book tour for her memoir, 107 Days, putting her back in the public spotlight. Her senior advisor has said that she is grateful to the Secret Service for their professionalism and dedication. With the detail ended, she may lose access to constant threat intelligence, and her Los Angeles home will no longer be guarded by federal agents. Her husband, Doug Emhoff, lost his personal detail in July under standard provisions. Governor Newsom is briefed and called the move outrageous. While local authorities discuss the possible security measures, Harris's aides warned the loss of detail could significantly increase risks. Now for this discussion, we go back to Scott Faulkner. He's in head of Eagle Enterprises. He's a security firm, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Scott, for staying with us. Now, what are the implications and potential security implications for Kamala Harris following the revocation of her Secret Service protection?
Not much at all. I mean, nobody cares about Kamala Harris. She was the most incompetent vice president and certainly the most incompetent presidential candidate in American history. She is the bottom of the barrel in terms of 2028 presidential aspirations. So no one really cares about her. And let's look at the numbers. She got a $20 million advance for this book that was probably ghostwritten. It costs about $1 million a month for Secret Service protection. And this isn't about just protection. Secret Service, when you're in that bubble, they do all the advanced work. They arrange the cars, they arrange the hotels. And given that the Democratic National Committee just bailed out another $2 million on the Harris campaign from last year, and she got this $20 million book advance, she has more than enough money, and her publishers, who are going to be basically arranging this book tour, have more than enough money to cover any security costs, certainly the logistics. The American taxpayers should have no role and certainly no checkbook in subsidizing a vanity project, which is Kamala running around the country promoting a book that she didn't write.
Right. And do you think, although you said that this doesn't affect anything, but do you think that this decision might impact the security protocols for other former vice presidents and high-profile political figures?
Once again, it's a long-standing rule that a former vice president gets 6 months of security, Secret Service security protection. That ran out a couple months ago. You know, whether Biden himself or his auto pen extended it for another year plus is irrelevant. I mean, anything written by one president that isn't normally in public law can be completely erased by another president. And so Trump basically was fully within his rights to cancel, would literally break precedent. There's not a single former vice president in American history that received Secret Service protection beyond the 6 months. So she's not special, in fact, quite the opposite.
Thank you very much, Scott Faulkner, for always joining us and sharing your insight all the way from Washington, D.C. Now we move on to Asia. Indonesian police have fired tear gas to disperse hundreds of protesters in Jakarta. The demonstrations erupted over the death of a motorcycle taxi driver who was reportedly run over by a police tactical vehicle. The driver, Afan Kurniawan, died during clashes between police and protesters who were demanding better wages and criticizing lawmakers' high perks. President Prabowo Subianto has promised a full investigation and vowed to hold officers accountable. 7 police officers are currently under investigation for violating ethics codes. Protests have spread to other cities, with thousands of motorcycle taxi drivers calling for justice. The unrest highlights growing public anger over the economy and government policies under President Prabowo. Let's listen into what one of the protesters have said.
Ikut aksi di sini karena sangat prihatin atas meninggalnya kawan seprofesi saya almarhum Alvan Sungguh menyedihkan bagi saya, meninggalnya sangat tragis. Demo kita ini menunjukkan bahwa kita menuntut keadilan untuk almarhum Apan agar pelaku yang menabrak itu diadili seadil-adilnya dan dipecat dari institusi terkait gitu loh.
Now for this discussion, we are joined by Colonel Sanjit Sirohi. He's an international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Colonel, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. How does this death of Afan Kurniawan and the subsequent protests reflect broader socio-economic challenges which Indonesia is facing today?
Asuma, first of all, I would like to tell you that these protests are being done since beginning of the year. In the January itself, the protest started, and basically the protests were regarding the low wages, higher taxes, rising living costs, and lack of jobs. So it is like any developing economy, all these factors are there, and because of that, there were a lot of protests. And to add to this thing, prior to this was this accident where the ride-sharing driver was killed by this police vehicle. So, because of that, and since it is not only the motorcycle drivers who are involved in this protest, there are students also involved. And whenever the students and wherever you see, wherever the students are involved, the protest normally it spreads to other cities also, other towns also, and it becomes more or less violent. So I think the basic reason is not because of this one man dying in an accident. Is basic reason, the root cause is that there is too much of inequality of income, especially the ruling class. The ruling class is getting 10 times more housing allowance than even the normal wage of a person. So you can understand the anguish and this thing of the normal public, which is now protesting, and because in this protest, the motorcycle driver got killed because of an accident. As a result, it is spreading to other towns and cities also. Asuma.
And Colonel, in what ways could this Indonesian government and police reform their approach to handling protests to prevent further violence? What do you think?
First of all, whatever they are doing, like their governor of Jakarta, he has gone to the person who was killed in an accident and paid the condolence to the family. I think this was a right gesture, and to some extent this should diffuse the situation. And although President has also said that he will look into the matter, and the 7 police officers who were involved in this protest firing and tear gas shells firing, all those have been arrested and a lot of investigation has been going on. I think the President and the police are doing their job, and the only thing is that this problem of low wages, high unemployment is going to increase because of the tariff war which has started by Americans. And Indonesia has been put on 19% of tariff, where the market for the American goods have been opened without any tariff, without any barrier. So I think in coming days, the unemployment will increase further, there will be rise in the prices also. So the government, not only Indonesian government, but all the countries, developing countries, must look into it and make sure that all these protests, they don't also start in their countries. So I think what President and what the police authorities are doing, they are doing the right job, and it will take some time before the situation is brought under control.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Colonel Sanjit Sirohi, for joining us and sharing that insight. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.